Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to JK's Rewatchable Hour presents The Walking Dead Files. I want to start tonight a little different. I wanted to tell all of our listeners about a new company I recently come across. It's that JK's Rewatchable Hour has come across. It's Big Fork. It's called Big Fork Brands. They sell sauces, bacon sausage, bacon hot dogs, craft pork sticks, and craft pork jerky. They have an overall rating of 4.8 stars on average, on average of 4.8 stars. Very highly recommended. None of us have received our product, but I'm hoping, I'm looking into ordering some myself. Hopefully it ends up being a really good product. I have to say that JK's Rewatchable Hour gets a commission if anything, if any sales are made with our tag. Sorry about that. My dog decided he was gonna get loud. So I want to start today's show about just gonna talk about the early seasons. Over the next couple episodes, we're gonna go through first 4 or 5 seasons of The Walking Dead. I'm gonna start from the beginning. I wanna Before I say that, there's a couple rules that kind of go along with The Walking Dead. Throughout talking about it and all of the spin-offs, there's a lot of coincidences that happen throughout the show. And any main character that you see not on the show anymore for a while, but you don't see them die or you don't see them become a walker as a walker or anything like that, or you don't hear a story about where somebody else saw them get killed, usually means you're going to see them later. There's a couple examples in the first episode, in the first season or so, that you don't see for a little bit later. There is one exception to the rule, but I'm hopeful that in later series or something, or if they do a reunion with all of the spin-offs now, that we will learn what happened to Heath. When I get to where Heath comes into the story, I'll explain. But right now, we don't know the fate. I'm pretty sure he is the only character we don't know the fate of at all. So let's start from the beginning. Rick and Shane are in their squad car pre-apocalypse, and they're just eating lunch and talking, and they get a call to go help the highway patrol. They're in pursuit of escaped convicts or criminals, and so they go out to the area and they set up the spike strips across the road so that way, they can stop the car. Kind of a, I would say, serious and yet comedic moment. The one deputy is not as smart as others that joins them. Two deputies join them, and one of them says, "Do you think we'll be on one of those cop shows?" And Rick says, "Don't worry about that. Make sure you have a round in the chamber and safety's off." So while he's doing that, Shane kind of looks as well at him and kind of gives him a dirty look. Then he looks back at Rick and says, "It would be kind of cool if we were on one of them shows." So they both kind of chuckle about it. Then the car comes over the hill being chased by a couple highway patrol cars, hits the spike strips, and rolls into a field. A shootout ensues, and they can't quite get the angle. So Rick says, "Cover me. I'm gonna get a better angle." And as he goes, he gets hit by a round, by a bullet, but it's in his bulletproof vest. So he looks down, he goes, oh, and he looks at Shane and he says, don't tell Lori about this. Lori being Rick's wife. And then he turns and he gets shot again, but this time it goes under the vest and hits him in the chest. Then that scene ends. Now in flashbacks and whatnot, we know that Shane is the one that told Lori, and she told Carl, his son, their son. So then the apocalypse breaks out, and in flashback scenes, you see where Shane tried to go get Rick, but couldn't get him, so he barricades the door, and the army is shooting people, and the electricity went out. Now, whether he thought Rick died or not, he barricaded the door nonetheless. So then Rick wakes up. And actually in the show, you don't see all of that in between with Shane and Lori and Shane trying to get Rick. Those are flashback scenes. But I thought it was important to bring it up right there. Rick wakes up, and apparently, I don't know where it was said, but apparently everybody's saying it's like day 59 of once the total outbreak hits. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know where that information came from, but I know I've seen it all over the place where they say it's day 59. So he wakes up, no power. He doesn't know what's going on. There's no nurses, no doctors. He does notice that the flowers that were on his bedside table have wilted. It looked like they've been there a while. He puts on just a pair of pants, and I think he still has the hospital gown on as well. And he leaves, he's looking around, he sees dead bodies laying around, but he doesn't know what's going on. He goes to the to the nurse's station, tries to use the phone's not working. There's no lights working. He finds some matches. He tries to go to this, he goes up to this double door, and the door says dead inside. Do not open, dead inside. And he can't get in because it's chained shut. But the walker's hands are reaching out, and he hears an eerie sound, and he doesn't know what's going on. He leaves the hospital through a staircase and uses the matches to get out. And he walks out, and there's dead laying all over the place, military vehicles around. He doesn't know what's going on. On his way home, he sees a woman that is turned into a zombie, into a walker, but she's not a walker because she has the bottom half of her is gone, but she's still crawling toward him. He finds a bicycle, and he rides it home. He goes into his house. He notices that no one's there, of course, but none of there's no pictures. There's no family pictures. There's no family albums. There's personal items missing. And he doesn't know why. He doesn't know what's going on. He walks back outside, and the way he's acting, because he just woke up from a coma and probably still in a little bit of pain from the gunshot wound, appears possibly like somebody thinks he's a walker. So Dwayne, who is Morgan's son, hits him with a shovel. When he wakes up, he's inside of a house. Morgan asks him if he got bit, and he goes, "Got bit? I don't understand." He said, "Were you bit? Your wound?" He goes, "No, it's a gunshot wound." So he says, "Okay," and he said, was shot and then I went into a coma. He goes, but I don't understand what's going on. Where is everybody? And where's all the dead? Why are they all dead? And then they explain, Morgan explains what's going on, offers him, gives him food, feeds him. And then the next day, like, he goes out and attacks and then kills a walker. Rick does his first, um, strangely enough, with a baseball bat. And they try to explain to him that it has to be a headshot. You have to kill the bird. So then they explained to him, about Atlanta, that everybody was told to go to Atlanta. And he said, well, that's where Lori would have gone because she has family and her parents live in Atlanta. And he goes, well, how do you know? Morgan says, how do you know they made it so far? Well, she goes, well, the way my house looked. And he said, well, it just could have been looters. And he said, yeah, but would looters take pictures and photo albums? He said, okay. So he takes Morgan and Dwayne to the police station. He uses his keys to get in and he explains to them if it still works, they have a propane backup system. So they'll have electricity and water and all that. And they even have hot water. So they're able to take a shower. First shower since probably the apocalypse has begun. So then he gets guns and in the show he gets all of the guns but he gives Morgan a couple and gives Morgan ammunition. He said the gun will be easier to take care of walkers. So it'd be easier to dispatch walkers if it's not, if a knife or a shovel or a bat will take them out. This will take them out much easier. And Morgan explains that it would be best if there was only a few. Now, Morgan won't leave the small town because his wife is a walker, who appears to be she appears to be kind of smarter than some of the walkers, like almost like she has a memory, but it's never really touched on or explained. So when they go out, he sees that deputy that had asked that stupid question, and he's a walker, and he says, well, he wasn't the smartest guy, but he doesn't deserve to be like this. And he gets ready to shoot him, and Morgan says, well, they'll bring a big crowd, and he says, well, then let's not be here when it gets here. So he takes care of the deputy. He gives Morgan a two-way walkie-talkie. These are special walkie-talkies that only the two of them link together. No other walkie-talkie or radio will hook up to these two. These are just basically two-way. He says, I'll get on to it every night. I think he says every night at dusk. Maybe he said every morning at dawn. And when you are ready, we'll try to hook up. You can come to Atlanta and, we'll meet up again. So they part ways. And then you don't see Morgan for a long time. That's the first example of just because you don't see them doesn't mean you're not going to see them later. So Rick is on his way to Atlanta in his squad car and obviously has to gas up several times. And one time when he's looking for gas, he walks up to a farmhouse. Well, I guess I should talk about the little girl. There's the little girl. He thinks it's a girl, and it turns out it's a walker, and he has to put her down. I don't know if that's, some people say that that's a foreshadow of Sophia, but I'm not sure. Um, so then he goes to a farmhouse to get gas and doesn't find any gas, but he knocks on the door and no one answers. And he looks in through the window and realizes the family has opted out. We're going to call it opted out. They decided they didn't want to deal with the apocalypse, so they put each other down. Well, he ends up discovering that there's a horse in the pasture. He takes the horse, he saddles it up, and you're going to ride it to Atlanta. And they say, and they make it to Atlanta. Very iconic scene as he enters Atlanta. Um, the incoming side of the highway is empty. The outgoing side is loaded with cars of people trying to get out, which would almost make you think maybe I should just turn, maybe I shouldn't go into the city because the report said go to the city, not leave the cities. Anyway, he goes into the city, um, sees a helicopter, and goes in the direction that the helicopter went. And in the process, comes across the horde of walkers. His horse gets startled. He falls off the horse. He tries to shoot a bunch of them, but he ends up being able to get away when they get the horse. But then some, but there's so many of them that the horse isn't enough for him. So some of them are still coming after him. He crawls. In the end, he drops the bag of guns. Crawls under a tank and is actually able to get into the tank from underneath. Um, Inside the tank, he's just sitting there. He doesn't know how to get out, and there's a soldier in the tank that um has been dead and has turned into a walker, and he has to shoot it, and his ears are ringing because it's very loud inside. Then the radio goes off, and he realizes that no, and a voice says, I'll help you. I'll help you get out. We'll cause a distraction, but you're going to have to run. And here's where you're going to have to run. And he says, well, I got a bag of guns. And he goes, it's too far. It's the wrong way. So he gets out of the tank and goes into the alley and meets Glenn. And they climb up. They end up going down the alley and then climbing up the building, going across the building and going back down because the walkers won't be there. And then they go to where Glenn's group is holed up in a store. Then he meets in there. He meets Andrea, Jaquai, Morales. I think those are all the ones, and T-Dog. I almost forgot about T-Dog. He meets them, and then he shows how focused he is when Andrea points a gun at him. And afterwards, he says, next time you point a gun at a person, you might want to take the safety off. So they realize that it's not good that the walkers, and the weird thing is some of the walkers are using like rocks to try to break glass and stuff. And that's never really explained how they can do that. They end up to hear gunshots from the ceiling. They go up, and that's when he meets Merle. Well, Merle is a redneck and he's racist, and T-Dog says something to him. T-Dog is a black man, and he says something to him, and he goes, I'm not going to listen to anyone of your kind. And, all that happens. And it's the one time in the show where a word that we're not allowed to say is said. And ends up when he's attacking and he's fighting, Rick handcuffs him to the pipe system on the roof of the building. And then they have to try to figure out a way out. And they're thinking, well, maybe the sewers. Maybe we can get out through the sewers. When they leave T-Dog up on the roof, and um and he gives him the key. Actually, I think that's later. They go down, they try to go in the sewer, they don't find it. They find it's blocked. There's no way they'll be able to get through without a set of torches or something. So they have to come up with a different way. And then Rick kind of comes up with an idea, and he leaves T-Dog in charge of Merle, and he gives T-Dog the key. He says, when you'll know when we're ready, and he says, just everybody be down there and be at the loading dock. So, because Rick says they go by smell, no, they determine they go by smell and sound. And the sound, no, the smell, he's like, well, that's why they go after us, because they don't go after each other. So they take a walker and they cut him up and they cover themselves in the guts, and Rick and Glenn go and they go out and they're gonna get a truck, and they got to figure out a distraction. Well, what they decide is they take a Dodge Charger that has an alarm, and he breaks the window. Rick breaks the window, and the alarm starts going off. So Glenn is going to drive the car around with the alarm going off to distract him. And Rick goes backs into the loading dock, and to get everybody. So T-Dog goes over to unlock Merle. And in doing so, he drops the key. He trips and he drops the key. So he leaves Merle, but he chains the door shut. And then he gets down. They all get into the truck, and he says, as they're leaving, they're basically says, well, where's Merle? And he says, well, I dropped the key. I said, oh. So they just keep going. And Morales points out to Rick that the biggest problem, I forget, JK'z was there. I don't know if I had said that JK'z was in the city. Morales tells Rick that the only problem is Daryl, Merle's brother. They'll have to tell him. So they get back to camp, and they're all reunited. And then he says, well, how'd you guys get out? Well, the new guy got us out. Well, who's the new guy? And Morales says, helicopter boy. And Rick steps out, and surprise, surprise, Shane, Lori, and Carl are in Glenn's group, the group that Glenn is in. So they're reunited. They explain the whole story and whatnot. And then they all get acquainted, and he meets everybody in the group. And then they, then at the evening dinner is basically when they learn about it. So the next day, a walker is discovered eating a deer that has an arrow stuck in it. And so they distract the walker, and then they start beating on the walker, and put him down, but he doesn't, they don't destroy. They don't kill his brain. And then Daryl comes up and he says, "Man, that was my deer. I've been tracking that." And he says, "Do you think we can cut around it?" And they're like, "No, too risky." And then he says, guys, just you got to kill the head, and because the walker is laying there still alive, but the head is severed. So he kills it, and then they go into camp, and he Daryl calls for Merle. Says, "Merle, get up. We got some squirrels. Help me clean them." And they say, "Well," and then they explain what happened, and that Merle is up there, and T-Dog explains, "I chained the door shut. Nothing could get, the walkers couldn't get to him." So they make the plan. They're going to go back. They also have to go back and get the guns. Rick said, "I left the guns." And there was also a two-way radio that somebody has the other end of. And I made a promise to him. So Glenn, T-Dog, Daryl, and Rick are going to go back into the city. But they need bolt cutters. And when they go to get the bolt cutters, Dale is kind of iffy on whether to give it to him, because they didn't come back with his tool bag from the last trip. He says, "Well, the tool bag's on the roof, so we'll grab that when we get there, and we'll bring that back." And Rick says, "Well, what kind of a deal can I get?" And he says, and Dale says, "Well, I'd like a choice of guns when you come back with the guns. I'd like my choice of guns." He says, "Okay, deal." Then Jim, who's kind of the mechanic of the group, says, he says, "Well," he says, "we can make the deal better." He goes, "It's not a good enough deal. We need a better deal." And he says, "Well, what deal?" And he says, "Well, that box truck of yours," he says, "I can use a lot of the parts off of it for the RV." He says, "When we get back, you can strip that down to the bare metal if you want. It's all yours." And he said, "Okay, deal." So they go into the city, and while they're gone in the city, Shane is going to take Carl to, now obviously everybody senses that, some people know and some people just sense that there was a thing going on with Shane and Lori. She makes it perfectly clear to him that it's over. Her husband's back. She thought he was dead. But Shane's going to take Carl to catch frogs, and they're down at the quarry, and some of the girls are washing dishes and washing laundry, stuff like that. And they're talking and they're laughing. And Ed, who is Carol's wife, who's abusive to her, he throws a fit, and the girls are standing up for Carol, and he ends up hitting Carol, and I think he swings at Andrea as well. And then Shane comes over and basically beats up Ed, and they have to stop him. It's kind of the first sign of Shane losing it. It's just my opinion. That's really the first signs of him losing it. So another thing that happens while they're gone is they notice on the hottest day, Jim is up on the hill. Dale had noticed Jim's up on the hill digging holes. And they go up and they're like, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" And he says, "I don't know why, but I'm not hurting anybody." And then they end up, because he's dehydrated and he's kind of losing his mind a little, they tie him to a tree make sure he's hydrated and in the shade and cooled down. And later he says, the only thing I remember is I had a dream. I don't remember what it was about, but that's why I was digging the holes. And they let him go. And Andrea and Amy, their sisters, who kind of caught a ride with Dale to get there, to get where they're at, they were out on a boat fishing and caught a bunch of fish. So they were going to have a fish fry that night. Well, in the meantime, in the city, as they're coming into the city, Rick says, he looks at Glenn and he says, guns or Merle first. And Daryl says, we're going for Merle first. And he goes, we're going for whatever's easier to do first. And he says, Merle's closer. We'll do that. When they go up and they discover that Merle's not there, but his hand is. And strangely enough, Daryl takes the hand. Yeah, very strange. So then they go down to the building and they realize that Merle had used the hacksaw to cut his arm off because it was obviously too strong to cut it wasn't strong enough to cut the handcuffs. So then they go down to the building and they realize that Merle has cauterized after he removed his own hand. He used some cans, some cans of gas that were down there to cauterize his hand. Then they decide to go for the guns. So they make a plan to go for the guns, and they're attacked by somebody else who wants the guns, and they end up capturing one of them. But that group catches Glenn. They end up getting the guns, and they have the guns. Then they got to figure out how they're going to get Glenn back by basically going after this guy. Making this guy tell them where to go. So they go and they are going to try to make a deal. One guy for the other, but the other group wants the guns as well. And he goes, they're not your guns. And Rick says, they're not your guns. So they end up, he says, you come back at this time, either give us our guns and our guy and you can take your guy, or be locked and loaded. With that, I'm going to end this one and ask you to make sure you subscribe and, subscribe to our channel. And we'll see you next time on the Walking Dead Files.